Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating concept from Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor. We're going to dive right into this massive tension that exists between being a, quote-unquote nice leader and being a truly effective one. So, I have to ask, are you too nice to lead? Seriously, think about it for a second. Most of us have been taught from a super young age that, hey, if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all, right? Well, as we're going to see in this explainer, bringing that specific mindset into the professional workplace is actually totally disastrous for building high-performing teams. To get to the bottom of this, we're going to break things down into 5 really clear parts. We'll cover the myth of nice bosses, the radical candor matrix itself, the 3 communication pitfalls, how to actually put candor into practice, and finally, some nuances and common criticisms. Let's get right into it. Starting off with part 1, the myth of nice bosses. So the whole origin of this philosophy actually stems from Kim Scott's own experiences. She spent years navigating these crazy high-pressure environments at places like Google, Apple, and Twitter. And what she discovered is that our default setting of niceness often completely gets in the way of actual excellence. There's this great story where Scott had just given this huge presentation. Other leaders are giving her all this vague praise, patting her on the back. But Sheryl Sandberg pulls her aside privately and gives her a totally different piece of feedback. She literally says, "You are one of our top performers, but that verbal tick makes you sound stupid." Turns out Scott kept saying over and over. Now, that sounds harsh, right? But Sandberg actually cared enough about Scott's long-term career to tell her the uncomfortable truth, while everyone else was just trying to be polite. For Scott, this was a total lightbulb moment. She realized that true care actually requires uncomfortable directness. Which brings us perfectly to part 2, the radical candor matrix. The intellectual anchor of this whole framework rests on 2 foundational axes of human communication. The vertical axis is all about caring personally, basically genuinely giving a damn about a person as a human being, not just looking at them as some output machine. So the crucial takeaway here is that this axis requires you to build real, authentic trust. It means getting to know your team's actual lives, what motivates them, and their ambitions way beyond the office walls. You really have to see them as whole people. Okay, then we have the horizontal axis, which is challenge directly. This is your willingness to tell someone the hard truth, clearly, specifically, and yes, even when it is incredibly uncomfortable to do so. This axis is quite literally the job of a leader. It's about pushing people to improve by saying the difficult things that, frankly, no one else has the courage to say. So when you plot these 2 axes against each other, you get this brilliant matrix with 4 distinct quadrants of management styles. You have radical candor, ruinous empathy, obnoxious aggression, and manipulative insincerity. And honestly, understanding exactly where you sit on this grid in any given interaction is basically the master key to unlocking your leadership potential. Let's move into part 3, the 3 communication pitfalls. Before we talk about the ideal state, we absolutely have to look at the traps. The things that catch almost every single leader at some point. And the most common failure mode by far is what Scott calls ruinous empathy. That is high care, but low challenge. There's this famous kind of heartbreaking cautionary tale from the book about an underperforming employee named Bob. Everyone loved Bob, but Bob's work was absolutely terrible. His boss was just way too nice to criticize his poor output, right? So he'd just tell him it was fine to spare his feelings in the short term. Well, eventually the work got so bad Bob had to be fired, and when he got the news, he was completely blindsided. His response? He just looked at his boss and asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" You see, ruinous empathy feels really nice in the moment, but ultimately it totally robs people of the opportunity to actually fix their mistakes. Now, we also see a really harsh contrast in the other 2 toxic quadrants. Down in the bottom right, you've got obnoxious aggression, low care, high challenge. This destroys trust through just blunt brutality. We all know this one. It's the classic jerk boss who criticizes without a single shred of empathy. Sure, it might get some short-term results, but it absolutely nukes team culture. And then there's manipulative insincerity, low care, low challenge. This is just the cowardly route. It relies on fake niceness, passive-aggressive politics, talking behind people's backs, all to protect your own political capital instead of actually helping your team grow. So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding that radical candor is not a license to be a jerk. That ideal upper right quadrant where we successfully combine high care and high challenge, it only works because the honest feedback is delivered specifically because you care about that person's success. It ensures that being direct never crosses the line into just being arrogant with better branding. The care for sure has to be the rock-solid foundation.
All right, part 4, putting candor into practice.
Because look, it's one thing to nod along and understand the framework. It's a whole different beast to live it every single day. The source material outlines a really crucial order of operations for any leader trying to do this. Step 1, you have to ask for criticism first. You must model vulnerability by asking for critical feedback on your own performance long before you ever start dishing it out to your team. You have to prove you can take it, right? And step 2, give frequent, immediate feedback. Candor needs to be a regular, everyday habit. Please, do not save it all up for some terrifying annual performance review. Make it immediate, make it specific, and always remember the golden rule: praise in public, criticize in private.
This brings us to part 5, nuances and common criticisms.
Because this framework deals with the messy, complicated reality of human relationships, we really have to explore its complexities. Management is never just one size fits all. Applying this means you actually have to manage people differently based on their specific career trajectories. Scott makes this great distinction between your rock stars and your superstars. Your rock stars, they provide steady excellence. They desire stability. They are the reliable bedrock of your team. Your superstars, on the other hand, are on a steep growth trajectory and they crave rapid advancement. You literally cannot treat them the same way. Forcing a rock star onto a rapid promotion track will just stress them out, and similarly, holding a superstar back will absolutely make them quit. We also have to be objective and acknowledge some of the valid criticisms of the book. Critics rightly point out that the framework kind of assumes a very specific Silicon Valley tech context, which makes sense given the constant Apple and Google examples. But it also arguably oversimplifies real-world workplace power dynamics. Think about it. Demanding total directness is way riskier when you're navigating super rigid corporate hierarchies. Plus, directness is often penalized differently depending on seniority or background. Being radically candid might be wildly mislabeled as aggressive, depending entirely on who is speaking. So that is vital context to keep in mind when you're trying to apply these lessons to different corporate environments. And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Under pressure, which toxic quadrant do you default to? Take a quick second to really reflect on your own communication habits. Ask yourself, honestly, where do you hide when the truth gets uncomfortable? Are you a ruinous empathizer, an obnoxious aggressor, maybe a manipulative, insincere communicator? Look, identifying your default trap is the very first step to actually escaping it. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to subscribe to The Explainer so you don't miss our next deep dive. Until next time, keep challenging directly and caring personally.